Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Big Ten matchup between Penn State and Oregon. Going to be a huge one. I am going to go with the Ducks in that one. I think it's going to be a battle back and forth, but can't necessarily pick against the firepower that Oregon offense has. But let's get into the ACC. Let's talk about SMU against Clemson. A huge game over there, and definitely one that could have a lot of CFP impacts one way or the other, where I've made my take known on here. If SMU is left out really under any circumstance other than getting blown out 45-0, teams will dodge title games. You cannot do that. You have to let them in. I think it's going to be one of those very contentious conversations as we get to Selection Sunday, but this could be the most impactful game of the bunch in this upcoming weekend where you have a lot of different implications. Maybe SMU can get a bye. Maybe SMU could fall all the way out of the field with a loss. So a lot of different things to talk about. Bama will be watching this game very, very closely, and we'll be cheering for SMU very, very hard, and Clemson fans would love to bury Bama hopes just one more time. But let's get into the actual matchup here, and I think when you talk about this matchup, it'll be kind of a battle of style. It's not necessarily going into this game the way that I view it, a battle of styles, but the openings that these defenses give you, you're definitely going to want to do it. So you have SMU. They're one of the best run defenses in the country. 9th in the country in rush yards allowed. They are 92nd in pass defense. Or Clemson is a little bit more consistent passing the ball. Not necessarily the greatest offense in the world passing the ball, but 13th in the country. Definitely needs to get a little bit more of that down-to-down success. Has had those explosive plays downfield, has had a tough time kind of stringing together drives, and that will be a huge part of this game, trying to find whatever run game you can. Will Phil Maffa only went for 66 yards against South Carolina. Cade Klubnik's legs were a factor in that game, but SMU is one where if you're not able to get a ton of push on that inside and you're not able to get at least a little bit of room, this Clemson offense is going to have a tough time really getting their feet under him in this game and really being able to attack downfield the way that they want to. But I do think it's an interesting thing to watch here where the SMU defense, I feel like people still don't give it the respect that it probably deserves. Especially the front seven is a very, very good unit. And I think when you look at this Clemson team where Phil Maffa is not playing well, when he is not necessarily on his game and not being the big-time factor that he can be, this Clemson offense is fine. It's not necessarily special, it's not necessarily dangerous, and it's definitely not one where the defense has to make all types of adjustments. They can pretty much play the game that they have to play right in front of them. Don't necessarily have to switch around too many things. It will be a huge test for SMU, maybe the biggest of the season on the defensive side of the ball, but they have the dudes to take care of it. There's no doubt about that. If Clemson is able to get that run game going just a little bit, they're able to open those big plays downfield, things open up in a hurry. That's definitely where this thing could get a little bit sketchy. And talking about the quarterbacks, that's going to be a huge factor in this game, is going to be their legs, one way or the other. Both these quarterbacks are plenty capable of running the ball. Cade Klubnik has more rushing yards this season, but Kevin Jennings is more than capable of absolutely making you hurt with his legs, and they've been really incredible since a couple of not so great games throughout the year. And Cade Klubnik really didn't have a great game against South Carolina, but he does have 12 total touchdowns, 2 INTs in the last 5 games. He's been really, really good. He's been a quarterback that has really kind of surged towards the late parts of the season, and more than anything is not giving the ball away. When you have that good of a defense on the other side and you have the ability to kind of make those big plays downfield, not giving the ball away is the most important thing. Cade Klubnik's been absolutely incredible at doing that. And then for Kevin Jennings, since that disaster of a game against Duke where they were able to escape, just miraculously were able to escape, he's had 10 total touchdowns, 2 INTs in the last 4 games. He's completed 68% of his passes in all 4 games. So he is as dialed in as you possibly could want him to be. This will be his biggest test for a defense that he is going to face, no doubt about that. The athletes that are on the other side are just a little bit different than a lot of the things that he has faced throughout his career. So a lot of different things to kind of go into this game, and SMU is definitely going to have to kind of meet that challenge. And it's something that I feel like is kind of around this game as we get a little bit closer to it. It's this era of, well, this is Clemson and it's SMU. Come on, it's Clemson and it's SMU. It's going to be Clemson. Clemson's going to be able to win this game. And I get that sentiment. And frankly, I'm having a tough time not following into that as well. But I do think SMU has some guys on the offensive line with some size. You talk about Logan Parr, a very talented offensive lineman, one of the better ones in the entire ACC. The thing is, on the other side is TJ Parker. On the other side is Peter Woods. It's not guys that you might have a physical advantage over. You definitely don't against these guys. These guys are absolute beasts. They're total problems off the edge, and they're going to have to be really effective. For the SMU D-line, that might be a bigger question because you do have Clemson. They have 300-pound guys all across their offensive line. SMU has about 1 or 2 on their defensive line here or there. It's not necessarily an elite group in terms of size. it is an elite group in terms of athleticism. They absolutely have the ability to take on a bigger guy and get around him and make a play on the ball carrier, but it will be a different battle. It will be a little bit bigger of guys. It will be a little bit longer. They will have the ability to get their hands on you a little bit quicker and then be forceful with them. So a lot of different things going into this game for SMU, and I think it's one of those battles where you've played incredible football. You've played really tough football for the first parts of this year. This is going to be a totally different challenge. If you played Miami earlier in the year and were able to win, maybe I'd feel a little bit better about this phenomenon, but you do look at that Clemson team compared to that SMU team. When they walk out of the locker room, they just look a little bit different. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean Clemson's going to win. It just means Clemson gets a certain level of athlete that SMU is not quite to getting. They absolutely will be getting in a couple of years, I have to imagine, but definitely one of those games where it's going to be a lot of different things happening. It's going to be a battle in the middle if SMU can win it. It's going to be one of those, can you live up to that challenge? Can you live up to that physicality? But the reality is, when you talk about this game, the physicality is going to be a huge part of it. Explosive play metric is probably going to be where this thing is decided, one way or the other. Both these teams can push the ball downfield. Clemson has struggled a little bit to stop that big-time play, so maybe SMU can find some of the openings that some of the other teams have been able to find, including South Carolina last week against Clemson, and really kind of open this thing up. But overall, I think coming into this game, Clemson was given a second life. They were given a chance to win a game, get into the CFP, and kind of spoil the fun for Alabama possibly. So a lot of things going into this game, and I think when you talk about Clemson overall, this is one that they probably don't deserve, if we're being totally honest. No disrespect to Clemson. They played really good football this year, but the reality is, if Miami was just able to take care of business last week, they would be in this thing. Clemson's been given a shot. Now it's time to kick the door down and see what happens. And then for SMU, you're in a really, really good spot. You're trying to join Texas. You're trying to join Oregon as the winners of new conferences. Now the issue is you got to prove a lot of people wrong, and you got to make sure that that committee doesn't look at you a little bit differently after this game. You got to make sure that win or loss, you are in that thing. I wish I could say that it's confident that you're going to be, but it's going to be really interesting to watch all of that unfold. And some players to watch. Jordan Hudson is going to be a problem in this game, a wide receiver for SMU. Since RJ Maryland has gone down, it's been a little bit more kind of by committee in the wide receiver and tight end room space. You have Roderick Daniels making a ton of plays. Jordan Hudson is the athlete on this team. He's the absolute difference maker, was a 5-star coming out of high school, is going to be one of those guys that can be a problem for Avian Terrell and a lot of these guys on the back end for Clemson. And then Kobe Wilson, one of the leaders of this defense, one of the guys that can be an absolute problem for Clemson. And you talked about Ahmad Walker, that other linebacker with them. One of the best linebacker duos in the entire country. They absolutely can make Clemson hurt. They absolutely can slow down Phil Maffa, who's another huge player in this game where Clemson has to get a run game going one way or the other. They cannot afford to play this game the same way they played South Carolina because you have a difference maker at quarterback again in Kevin Jennings. You have guys on the outside that can make some plays again. So you have a team on the other side that is going to cause some problems for you. If you can get Phil Maffa going, if you can get his feet under him, it's going to be a problem for SMU to deal with, and maybe a couple of those big plays over the middle of the field will really open up. And then Sammy Brown. He's been so impressive the last little bit. The linebacker, the freshman for Clemson, he's been really, really impressive. And when you talk about really the entire linebacker group, they're going to have to run down Kevin Jennings quite a bit in this game. One way or the other, they're going to have to make plays on him, and Sammy Brown's going to be a huge part of that effort. And then keys to the game. For SMU, you got to handle the emotions. It's a lot going into this game, and there's probably a little bit of anger in that locker room with the way that they feel like they're being talked about in the CFP race. You got to handle all of that. You got to make sure that you go in with a totally clear eyes and not worry about all of that type of stuff, because it's relatively easy to worry about that stuff. So definitely going to be put the test into a team that is very comfortable in this position in Clemson. And then Kevin Jennings. The Clemson linebackers are really incredible. You got to make sure you hold them at bay. And the best way to do that is make sure they hesitate in that quarterback run game. I think Kevin Jennings is just always a threat to pull it and go 60 yards. So one of those very interesting game plans where maybe SMU leans on that a little bit more than they have in the past couple of games. And then no big pass plays. Just make sure that Clemson has to earn everything that they get. I don't think they're capable of doing that offensively. I don't think they're capable of putting together a 14-play drive late in the season and making sure that they get a 7 points out of it. So eliminate some big plays downfield. Make sure that you can kind of pin this offense in, and they probably won't be all that successful, frankly. And then the keys to the game for Clemson, consistent run game. They weren't able to find it last weekend. You just have to find it one way or the other. Whether it's Jay Haynes or Phil Maffa or Cade Klubnik, you got to make sure that you're able to move the chains on a 3rd and 3, on a fourth and 2, where you have that run game to go back to. If you're getting pushed around all day up front, it's going to be a really, really long day for this offense. And then you do have a physicality advantage. One way or the other, you just have bigger dudes. So you have a Peter Woods, you have a TJ Parker, you have guys up front that are going to be problems for you on the offensive line. Can you kind of just impose your will? Can you lean on this team just a little bit more than you were able to a South Carolina or a couple of the other teams you played, and definitely impose your will just a little bit more and definitely open a couple of doors in that pass game and then kick the door down? You've been given an opportunity that maybe you don't deserve, if I'm being totally honest, but you have it. One way or the other, you have the chance to walk into that stadium, get a win, move on to the CFP. You just got to kick the door down and make sure that you play the game that you are very comfortable playing in this building. And frankly, I think they're going to do it. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know what this game looks like. I think it's going to be a little bit all over the place. I think Clemson's going to get it done. I think they're very comfortable in this spot. I think Dabo Swinney's going to have them ready to roll, and I think they get the win. I kind of hate to say it. I think this should keep SMU in. I think a 3-point loss, if it knocks SMU out, I have some big problems. I'll be totally honest with you. So a lot of different things to kind of go into this one, and it's going to be a really, really fun game, and we'll have plenty of an impact on what the CFP looks like on Sunday. But a lot of different things going on in this game, and I believe Anthony had a question over here. Yeah, it's kind of walking a tightrope when you talk about the CFP committee around this time of year, because you have to wonder, do you measure recent stuff a little bit more aggressively? Do you take the whole body of work and take the full 12 weeks into account? It's a total toss-up to me. I've always leaned a little bit more towards Bama, but frankly, that's a total toss-up. I think you could have gone Miami, and I would have had no problem. You probably could have gone Ole Miss or South Carolina, and I wouldn't have had a problem. So that's just kind of what the 12-team playoff brings you. You bring a couple of teams that are relatively flawed one way or the other. You just got to figure out which one is most deserving. It's kind of a crapshoot, if I'm being totally honest. I do agree that maybe not quite enough emphasis was put on that Oklahoma game, but it's a battle back and forth, and I'm sure they had that battle for quite a few hours in that room. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we got to talk about Arizona State, Iowa State, a very interesting game that doesn't necessarily have the implications where both teams could be in the playoff. That might just make it a little bit more intense, and we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.